Sarah Brennan stood at the edge of her father's ranch, where the wooden fence gave way to endless scrubland that stretched toward mountains the color of bruised plums. Her hand rested on the weathered post, fingers tracing patterns worn smooth by wind and time. "Come winter, Sarah. I'll be back by first snow." Those had been his words, Jack Thornton's words, spoken 3 months ago beneath this same sky, when autumn had just begun to paint the cottonwoods in shades of amber. His hands had cupped her face like she was something precious and breakable, his thumbs brushing away tears she'd tried to hide. "That's what you said about the cattle drive last year," she'd whispered, voice catching. "This is different." His green eyes had held hers with an intensity that made her believe. "There's enough silver in those Colorado mountains to buy us our own spread. No more working another man's land, no more waiting." He'd kissed her then, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that tasted like promises and goodbye all mixed together. When he'd pulled away, he'd pressed something into her palm, a silver pocket watch, the cover engraved with initials that weren't his own. "My father's," Jack had said quietly. "Only thing I got left of him. You hold on to it till I come back." She'd watched him ride out with 6 other men, their horses kicking up clouds of red earth that hung in the morning air long after they'd disappeared into the vastness. The watch had stayed warm in her hand for hours afterward, still carrying the heat of his body. Now standing in the copper light of another sunset. Sarah pulled that same watch from her pocket. The metal was cold against her skin. She opened it, studying the hands frozen at 3:47, the exact moment it had stopped working 2 winters ago. She'd never had it fixed. Maybe she was afraid that if time started moving inside it again, it would prove what everyone else already believed, that Jack Thornton wasn't coming back. "Sarah, supper's on." Her younger sister Beth's voice carried across the yard, bright and untroubled. Beth had been 14 when Jack left, young enough to still believe in fairy tales, old enough to recognize heartbreak when she saw it. Sarah closed the watch with a soft click and turned toward the ranch house. Smoke curled from the chimney in lazy spirals. Through the window, she could see her father's silhouette, hunched at the table the way he'd been since the accident that took his leg. Her mother moved between stove and table, her movements efficient and worn smooth by repetition. "You're gonna wear a path in that dirt standing out there every evening," Beth said as Sarah climbed the porch steps. "Maybe. Mama's worried, says you're wasting away." Sarah managed a smile that felt like cracked leather. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. 7 winters had come and gone. 7 years of waiting, of watching the horizon, of lying to herself that this would be the season he'd appear. Dusty and road-weary, but grinning that crooked grin that had stolen her heart when she was 17 years old. Inside, the house smelled of cornbread and beans. Her father looked up from his Bible, eyes softening. "Sarah, girl, come eat." She sat, folding her hands in her lap while her father said grace. The words washed over her like river water, familiar, expected, providing no comfort. When he finished, her mother ladled beans onto tin plates. "Thomas Crawford came by today," her mother said, too casual. Sarah's spine straightened. "What did he want?" "Asked after you." Her mother wouldn't meet her eyes. "Said he's got a good spread now, 200 head of cattle. Says he'd be honored if you'd allow him to call on you proper-like." "I'm not interested." "Sarah, I said no, Mama." Her father cleared his throat. "Tommy's a good man. Got prospects. You could do worse. I could do better, too." The words came out sharper than intended. The table fell silent except for the scrape of spoons against tin. Beth kicked her ankle under the table, a warning, a reminder to be gentle. Their parents meant well. Everyone in town meant well. But their well-meaning felt like drowning, like being buried alive under the weight of other people's reasonable expectations. After supper, Sarah escaped to the porch. The sky had deepened to indigo, stars beginning to prick through the darkness like pinhole wounds in fabric. She sat on the steps, the watch heavy in her pocket. "He's dead, you know." Sarah didn't turn. Beth sat beside her, drawing her shawl tight against the cooling air. "You don't know that." "7 years, Sarah. 7 years and not even a letter, not a word." Beth's voice was gentle but firm. "Even if something kept him away, injury, jail, amnesia like in them dime novels, he would have sent word if he was able. Unless he couldn't. Or wouldn't." The words hit like a fist. Sarah's jaw clenched. "Jack wouldn't do that. The Jack you knew wouldn't. But people change. 7 years is a long time. Maybe he found something better in Colorado. Maybe—" "Don't." Sarah stood abruptly. "Don't you dare." She walked into the darkness beyond the house, toward the old cottonwood where Jack had carved their initials that last summer. Her fingers found the letters in the bark. JT plus SB, worn but still readable. The night pressed close, filled with the chirp of crickets and the distant yip of coyotes. Somewhere out there, beyond the dark bulk of the mountains, was the rest of the world. Towns and cities, silver mines and cattle ranches, endless possibilities. Somewhere out there, Jack Thornton was either dead or had become someone who could forget her. Sarah pressed her forehead against the rough bark and let herself cry for the first time in months. Great, shuddering sobs that tore from her chest and left her hollow. When she finally stopped, when the tears had dried salt-tight on her cheeks, she felt something shift inside her. 7 years. Everyone was right. 7 years was long enough to grieve. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she'd tell Thomas Crawford he could call on her. Tomorrow she'd take off the brave face and admit what her heart had known for years. Jack Thornton wasn't coming home. Winter came hard that year. Snow fell in sheets across the New Mexico high desert, rare and heavy, turning the landscape into something alien. Sarah watched it from the ranch house window, coffee warming her hands, and thought about promises made and broken. Thomas Crawford had called 3 times now. He was exactly as her parents had said, steady, reliable, kind. He talked about expanding his herd, about building a bigger house, about children and legacy and all the sensible things a 29-year-old woman should want. She'd said yes to a 4th visit. The morning it happened, Sarah was in town with Beth, buying supplies before the next storm hit. Salvation, barely 20 buildings and a church, served as the territory's last outpost before the desert swallowed everything. The general store smelled of tobacco and dried goods, Mr. Chen behind the counter tallying their order. "That'll be $4.30, he said in his precisely accented English. Sarah was counting coins when Beth gasped. Sarah, look." She followed her sister's stare through the frost-etched window. A man was dismounting outside the saloon, tall, lean, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who'd been in the saddle too long. His hat was pulled low, duster coat dusty and torn at the hem. But it was the way he stood, the set of his shoulders that made Sarah's heart stop. "It's not him," she whispered. But her feet were already moving. The cold hit her like a slap when she pushed through the door. Her breath came in white clouds as she stepped into the street. The man was tying his horse, a rangy buckskin that looked half-starved, to the hitching post. "Jack?" Her voice was barely audible over the wind. The man stilled. Slowly, so slowly it felt like watching the hands of a clock, he turned. Gunmetal gray eyes met hers, harder than she remembered, older. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, and his face was weathered like wood left too long in the sun. But it was him. God help her, it was him. "Sarah!" Her name in his voice was a match striking flint. 7 years collapsed into nothing. She was 22 again, watching him ride away, believing in promises. Then the anger hit. You son of a bitch. Jack flinched like she'd struck him. I can explain. 7 years! Her voice cracked. People were emerging from buildings now, drawn by the commotion. 7 goddamn years, Jack Thornton, and you show up now? You show up when I've finally— She couldn't finish. Her throat closed around the words. Beth appeared at her elbow, hand on her arm, but Sarah shook her off. Jack took a step forward, hands raised like she was a spooked horse. I know what it looks like. But Sarah, where were you? The words were razors. What was so important that you couldn't send even one letter? One word that you were alive? I was in prison. The street went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Jack's jaw worked, that familiar tell when he was wrestling with something difficult. Got arrested first winter out. They said I killed a man in a card game dispute. Said I shot him in the back. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I didn't, but I couldn't prove it, and the dead man was the mine owner's nephew. Sarah felt Beth's hand tighten on her arm. The gathering crowd murmured. They gave me 20 years, sent me to the territorial prison in Yuma. Jack's voice had gone flat, reciting facts like a telegram. Took me 6 years to prove I wasn't even in that town the night of the murder. Found a witness who remembered me from a ranch 50 miles away. 6 years. Sarah's lips were numb. And the 7th? Getting here. His eyes never left her face. Walking most of it. Working odd jobs for food. I had to— He swallowed hard. I had to become someone different to survive in there, Sarah. Had to learn to be hard. When I got out, it took me months to remember how to be human again. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe. But 7 years of waiting had built walls around her heart, thick as prison stone. Do you have proof? Pain flickered across his face. Release papers, in my saddlebag. But Sarah, show me. Jack moved to his horse, moving slowly, carefully, like she might bolt. He pulled out a leather portfolio, worn and water-stained. Inside were documents with official seals. A letter from a territorial judge. A pardon signed by the governor himself. Sarah read them twice. The words blurred. Her hands shook. I tried to write, Jack said quietly. First year I wrote every week. But the warden burned every letter. Said I was a murderer and didn't deserve contact with the outside world. By the 2nd year, I stopped trying. He took a shuddering breath. I thought you'd moved on. Thought you'd married some good man and had children by now. Part of me hoped you had. I waited. The words escaped before she could stop them. I waited 7 years, Jack. Everyone told me you were dead or worse, that I was a fool. But I waited. I'm sorry. His voice broke. Sarah, I'm so sorry. She stared at this man who was Jack but wasn't. Not the Jack who'd left anyway. Prison had carved away the softness, left only angles and edges. His hands were scarred, knuckles that had been broken and healed wrong. But his eyes, beneath all that hardness, still held that same desperate need to be believed. I don't know what to do with this, she whispered. Neither do I. Beth stepped forward. Maybe y'all should talk. Somewhere private. The crowd was watching, waiting. Sarah could feel their judgment, their curiosity. Old Mrs. Henderson clutched her shawl. Sheriff Morrison had his hand on his gun, as if Jack might suddenly prove violent. Thomas Crawford stood in the saloon doorway, his face unreadable. Come on, Sarah heard herself say. We'll go to the ranch. The ride was silent. Jack followed on his buckskin, keeping a respectful distance. Beth drove the wagon, giving Sarah space to think, to try to make sense of the impossible. At the ranch, her mother took one look at Jack and went pale. Her father struggled to his feet, Bible falling from his lap. That's Jack Thornton, her mother breathed. Was, Sarah said. This is someone who used to be Jack Thornton. They sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Sarah had eaten 1,000 meals, where Jack had sat 7 years ago asking permission to court her. Her mother served coffee with shaking hands. Her father just stared. Jack told the story again. More details this time. The fight he'd stopped that turned into a murder charge. The trial that lasted 2 days. The prison. Brutal. Dehumanizing. A place designed to break men and often succeeding. The years of appealing, of filing motions with help from a sympathetic lawyer who worked for pennies. The witness who finally came forward. The release that felt less like freedom and more like exile. "All I thought about was getting back to you," Jack said, staring into his coffee. "It was the only thing that kept me sane, but the closer I got, the more I realized I got no right to walk back into your life, not after all this time." Sarah's father cleared his throat. "Why'd you come back at all, then?" Jack finally looked up. His eyes found Sarah's. "Had to know she was all right. Had to see for myself. Then I could—" He swallowed. "Then I could leave in peace." "You were just gonna look and go?" Sarah's voice was raw. "Figured that's what you'd want. Figured you'd built a life without me." "I did," she said, and watched him flinch. "I had to. You don't get to understand that? I waited as long as I could. Then I had to learn how to breathe without you." "I know. I'm 29 years old, Jack. I got a good man interested in marrying me. Thomas Crawford. He's steady, kind here. He hasn't missed 7 years of my life." "Then you should marry him." Jack's voice was hollow. "You should have the life you deserve." "Don't you dare tell me what I deserve." Sarah stood abruptly, chair scraping. "Don't you dare show up after 7 years and act like you know what's best for me." "Sarah," her mother started. "No." She rounded on all of them. "Y'all wanted me to move on. Told me I was wasting my life. Now Jack's back and you look at me like I'm supposed to know what to do. Well, I don't. I don't know anything anymore." She grabbed her coat and fled into the cold. Night fell like a curtain. Sarah sat in the barn, in the hayloft where she and Jack used to hide as teenagers, stealing kisses and dreaming about the future. Below, she could hear the horses shifting, the soft sounds of animals settling for sleep. The barn door creaked. Footsteps on the ladder. Jack emerged into the loft, moving slowly, giving her time to send him away if she wanted. When she didn't speak, he sat against the opposite wall, leaving the space between them like a canyon. "Used to love it up here," he said quietly. "Me too." Silence stretched. Outside, the wind howled. "I'm not the same person," Jack finally said. "Prison does things to you, changes you in ways that don't wash off. I got into fights, had to survive. Did things I'm not proud of, hurt people who tried to hurt me worse." He stared at his scarred hands. "Sometimes I wake up and don't recognize myself in the mirror." Sarah pulled the pocket watch from her dress. Held it out. Jack's breath caught. "You kept it. Every day for 7 years, even when I thought you were dead, even when I tried to hate you." He reached for it slowly, like it might burn. When their fingers touched, electricity sparked. 7 years vanished. They were young again, untouched by time and hardship. "I loved you," Sarah whispered. "Loved you so much it felt like dying." "Loved?" She pulled her hand back. "I don't know what I feel anymore, Jack. I'm angry and relieved and heartbroken all at once. You're here, but you're not here. You look like Jack, but you move like a stranger." "I am a stranger, even to myself sometimes." He turned the watch over in his hands. "But Sarah, what I feel for you, that never changed. That's the one part of me that stayed the same. In the worst moments, when I thought I'd go crazy, I'd close my eyes and see your face, hear your laugh, remember the way you looked at me like I was worth something. You were worth everything." Was. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah wiped her eyes. I don't know if I can do this again. The hoping, the waiting. What if something else happens? What if... Then we face it together. Jack shifted closer. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm not asking you to throw away whatever you've built. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that pieces of the old Jack still exist. That maybe, if you're willing, we could find our way back to each other. And if we can't, then at least I'll know I tried. At least I'll have said what I came to say. His voice dropped. I love you, Sarah Brennan. Never stopped. Never will. The words cracked something open inside her. 7 years of carefully constructed defenses crumbled. She was crying, great, heaving sobs that she'd held back for so long. Jack moved then, crossing the distance, pulling her into his arms. He smelled different, like horses and road dust and something harder, something prison-made. But underneath, faint as memory, was the same scent she remembered. Home, safety, everything she'd lost. I'm scared, she whispered against his chest. Me too. They stayed like that as the night deepened, as snow began to fall outside, as the world narrowed to just the two of them in a hay-filled loft, holding on to each other like drowning people clutching driftwood. Morning came cold and clear. Sarah woke in her own bed, for a moment forgetting the previous day. Then it crashed back, Jack, the prison, the impossibility of it all. Downstairs, she found him sitting with her father. They looked up when she entered, guilt written across both faces. We were just talking, her father said, about the property. What about it? Jack stood. Your father says you've been managing most of the ranch work since his accident. Says you're better with cattle than most men. She's got a gift, her father said quietly. Always has. Sarah poured coffee, trying to make sense of this scene. Jack and her father, the two most important men in her life before Jack left, sitting together like no time had passed. I got release money from the territory, Jack said. Not much, but enough to buy some breeding stock. Could help build up the herd if... He trailed off, uncertain. If what? If you'd let me. Not asking for anything else, Sarah. Just asking to help. To prove I can be reliable. Before she could answer, hoofbeats sounded outside. Through the window, Sarah saw Thomas Crawford dismounting. Her stomach dropped. I'll go, Jack said immediately. No. Sarah set down her coffee. Stay. Thomas knocked, then entered when Sarah called out. He was cleaned up from yesterday, wearing his good Sunday coat. His eyes went immediately to Jack, then to Sarah. Miss Sarah, I wanted to call properly, but given the circumstances... He took off his hat, turned it in his hands. Reckon we need to have a conversation. Thomas, let me speak my piece. He drew a breath. I know who this is. Whole town knows by now. And I know you got history. He looked at Jack. I also know I'm the one who's been here. The one who's called on her proper, with intentions. Jack's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Thing is, Thomas continued, I got feelings for you, Sarah. Strong ones. I think I could make you happy, give you a good life. But I also ain't blind. He smiled sadly. The way you looked at him yesterday, you never looked at me like that. Thomas, you're a good man. I know I am. That's the hell of it. He turned his hat. I'm asking you straight. Is there any chance? Any possibility that if I give you time, you might feel for me what you clearly feel for him? Sarah's throat closed. She looked at Jack, who was staring at the floor, hands clenched, then at Thomas with his honest face and kind eyes. I don't know, she whispered. I wish I could say yes. You deserve that. Thomas nodded slowly. That's answer enough. He put his hat back on. I hope you find what you're looking for, Miss Sarah. I truly do. He nodded to Jack. You've got a second chance here. Don't waste it. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with finality. Sarah's father broke the silence. That was a good man. I know. But he wasn't your man, her mother said softly, appearing from the kitchen. Never was, really. Sarah looked at Jack. I need time. Take all you need. I mean it. I need to see if the man I loved still exists under all that prison hardness. Need to know if we can build something real from these ruins. Jack met her eyes. I'll wait as long as it takes. Difference is, this time I'll be here. You can see me every day. Watch me work. Decide if I'm worth the risk. Winter deepened. Jack took up residence in the ranch's bunkhouse, working from sunup to sundown. Sarah watched him repair fences, break horses, work cattle with the easy competence of someone born to it. But she also saw the shadows that crossed his face when he thought no one was looking, the way he startled at loud noises, the nightmares that had him pacing the yard at 3 a.m. Slowly, carefully, they began to talk. Real conversations, not the stilted exchanges of those first days. Jack told her about prison. Not everything, but enough. The fights, the alliances, the grinding monotony broken by sudden violence. The way hope became dangerous, so you learned to kill it before it killed you. Sarah told him about the years of waiting, the gossip, the pitying looks, the slow death of certainty, how she'd had to reshape herself into someone who could function without him. I'm not expecting you to be who you were, she said one evening, sitting on the fence, watching the sunset. That girl died a little bit every year you were gone. Maybe that's okay. Jack leaned against the fence beside her. Maybe we need to meet each other as who we are now, not who we were. February came, bringing a false spring. Jack had been back 3 months. The routine had become comfortable. Work, dinner with her family, evenings where they'd talk or just sit in companionable silence. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give. Then one morning, Sarah woke to find him already at work. She watched from the window as he gentled a half-wild colt, his movements patient and certain. The horse, scared, angry, lashing out, gradually calmed under his steady presence. She thought about Thomas Crawford. Good. Reliable Thomas, who would have given her a safe, predictable life. Then she thought about Jack. Broken, scarred, carved into something harder by circumstance, but still, fundamentally, the man she'd loved. Safety wasn't love. Predictability wasn't passion. She found him in the barn, unsaddling the colt. Jack. He turned, and something in her face made him go still. I've been thinking, she said. That sounds dangerous. I'm angry at you. Maybe I always will be, a little bit. You lost 7 years of our lives. I know. But you didn't choose it. You didn't abandon me. You were stolen from me. She stepped closer. And I'm tired of punishing both of us for something that wasn't your fault. Jack's breath caught. Sarah, I love you. The words came easier than she'd expected. I never stopped. I tried. God knows I tried. But you're woven into me. You're part of my bones. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, hands cupping her face the way he had 7 years ago. I love you. I'll love you till I die. Then don't leave me again. Never. I swear on everything. She kissed him, cut off his words with her mouth, pouring 7 years of longing into it. Jack made a sound, half sob, half relief, and pulled her closer. When they finally broke apart, both were crying. Marry me, Jack said. Not because of some old promise, not because we're trying to recapture what we had. Marry me because of who we are now. Yes, Sarah laughed through tears. Yes, you stubborn, infuriating, wonderful man, yes. They married in spring when the desert bloomed in impossible colors. The whole town came, even Thomas Crawford, who shook Jack's hand and wished them well with genuine grace. Under the same cottonwood where Jack had carved their initials, where Sarah had cried enough tears to water the roots, the circuit preacher bound their hands with cloth. "Do you take this woman?" "I do," Jack said, before the preacher finished. Sarah laughed. "Let him finish the ceremony." "I've waited 7 years, not waiting another second." The crowd laughed. Beth wiped her eyes. Sarah's parents stood together, her father's hand on her mother's shoulder. "Do you take this man?" "I do," Sarah interrupted, and Jack grinned. The preacher sighed. "Well then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may—" Jack was already kissing her. Years later, sitting on the porch of their own ranch, modest but theirs, Sarah would pull out the pocket watch. It still didn't work, frozen at 3:47, but she'd never fixed it. It was a reminder that some broken things were worth keeping, that time didn't heal all wounds, but love could bridge them. Jack would sit beside her, scarred hands holding hers, and they'd watch the sunset paint the desert in shades of copper and gold. They'd built something from ruins, not a reconstruction of what they'd had, but something new, tempered by hardship, strengthened by survival. Their story wasn't the fairy tale Sarah had imagined at 22. It was harder, more complicated, marked by loss and absence. But it was real. It was earned. It was theirs. And in the end, that was enough. In the end, that was everything. Thanks for staying to the end of this Western tale. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic stories of love, loss, and redemption from the American frontier.